All right, well, I'm going to start the recording, and I think we can kick ourselves off. We got to.
Work that we've done, the presentations that we've shared, and hopefully bringing you, as we talked about just a moment ago, a little bit more live, something that we can interact with. We'd love to interact with all of you. We've got a virtual forum here today with the speakers from the IFT session, as well as additional industry leaders who are here to share their perspectives on clean label, clean living, and all of the work that we need to do to kind of create great products for consumers and how we integrate consumer feedback and involvement into everything that we do. I'm Sarah Kirkmeyer. I'm a client partner at Insights Now and really have the privilege to moderate this session. What we're going to do throughout the session is we want you to chat with us, so please put your questions in the question box. We'll work to answer all of those, really make this a dialogue and an opportunity for us to share. We've got great questions, and we're going to start off a little bit with our three speakers, and we're going to have them just provide a short snippet of some of the information that they shared in their session if you went to it virtually, and then we'll move into our panel discussion. We've got specific questions to ask and hopefully foster some great discussion throughout. So first is Greg Stuckey, the Chief Research Officer of Insights Now, then Mimi Sherlock, Global Director of Strategic Insights from IFF, and then Webb Gerard, Director of Research and Development from Culinex. These are our three speakers, and they'll give us a short snippet, and we'll just do a little bit of questions about their talk. Greg, will you kick us off?
Sure, well, glad to. So the focus of my talk really was to highlight some key global insights about clean label. And the first big insight from series of pieces of research that we were doing around clean label enthusiasts back before COVID and then into COVID was that culture matters. And what we're seeing, and that may be a simple statement that everybody really expects maybe to hear, but the specificity of how we communicate clean label in each of the different cultures matters. What matters to people in some countries is not quite as important to people in other countries. So what we want to do is say, as COVID came along, what happened was we went from some pretty broad, like country oriented, like the Americas and Europe group were all kind of similar in how they communicated, and the Asian nations kind of similar. It started getting much more culture centric because COVID really focused us in on our own short window purview of the world. It made us much more inwardly focused. So culture matters. As we're going through this COVID and you're talking clean label, get more and more focused on culture. Second was that ingredients really do matter. We're seeing the confluence of three big trends, right? The clean, the free from trend, the clean eating plant-based trend growing really fast. And now what's happening with COVID is the dieting trend, which everybody was just dying essentially, is now spiking back up as people are coming out of COVID. And we talk about the COVID-15, which I think should be the COVID-19. For some people, it might be the COVID-37. I don't know, but it's definitely amongst my friends and families, definitely noticeable. And they're all going, now that we're starting to go out to restaurants, we better change our diet again. But those diets are not necessarily specific, right? Not like just, I gotta lose weight. Around the world, it's different diets. And then the final point is nutrition beats taste. And we've heard time and time again, especially in the sensory community, taste is king. In clean label, you have the opportunity, you can't make a bad product, but you have the opportunity to make a product where you can highlight an ingredient that might not get as high a liking score in favor of nutrition. And people will expect that characteristic to help them understand that the product is delivering nutrition. So that's a big piece from my talk.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Greg. So interesting how we can kind of take that, and now Mimi is going to integrate this information and share how, really delve into the case study work that we've done. So Mimi, take it away for us.
Yes. Great. Hi, everyone. Mimi Sherlock here, and I'm the Director of Strategic Insights for International Flavors and Fragrances. And yes, as Sarah was saying, I'm going to take you through, or my talk took us through a case study, which was quite a fun one. And so my session was really just kind of taking you through that entire case study and what happened. Basically, to summarize it, we had the opportunity together, IFF and Insights Now, to go to Turkey and do some new concept developments and new concept creation with consumers on indulgent snacks. And we did that late last year in November. And we developed some great new concepts, and there was quite a variety of things that were developed, both things that were, I would say, more on the cleaner, more healthy side in indulgence, and ones that were more traditionally, just full-on indulgence. And so we saw that we could create some really great concepts. And the way that we did that was we utilized the IFF Sprint methodology, which is a very consumer-centric process around innovating very quickly with consumers and the product development team. And we also used a technique called Playful Insights from Insights Now, which allowed us to go very deep, get very good insights, and go very deep with consumers and product developers sitting together. And that really allowed us to develop what ended up being some very well-liked indulgent snack concepts. So that was back in November, and we actually hadn't tested the concepts after we developed them in November. And what happened was COVID hit, right? So the COVID disruption hit, and we were really kind of intrigued with what was going on with the effect of COVID and how that would affect consumers. And we had a chance to go back to Turkey, which was wonderful. And we thought, wow, we had heard these aspirations from consumers about their wants and need for healthy indulgence and cleaner indulgence. Maybe now they're even more ready for that. And so we worked together with Webb Gerard at Culinex, and together we put together some healthier, cleaner versions of our indulgent snack concepts. So we were able to go back to Turkey post-COVID, or post the outbreak. This was really just in May, and test those concepts. And lo and behold, we were able to compare kind of the more traditional indulgent with the healthier, and some of our healthier concepts scored just as well as not only the healthier concepts, but even the market standard in Turkey for healthy indulgence. So we saw that shift, and we saw kind of this aspiration turn into a bigger change for consumers, where they were willing to choose the healthier, cleaner indulgent snack. At the same time, we were able to dive deeper and learn even more about how to communicate and what consumers are associating with indulgence, so that we knew how to utilize that insight together with some great ingredients that we have at IFF, together with culinary expertise that Culinex provided in terms of making it all come together to combine health and indulgence. And we got some great insights above and beyond just knowing that these concepts were scoring really high and really well. I guess one of the things that was most interesting was around the idea of sugar-free, and realizing that, a lot of times we're thinking, oh, healthy indulgence, that means sugar-free. That's one pathway. But what we found out is that it doesn't have as much implicit power with consumers of triggering the idea that would be a great healthy indulgent snack to choose. There's other ways to cue healthy indulgence. And so we got a lot of great insights that we shared, not only about how to communicate about indulgence, but what some of the other sensory characteristics, that consumers expected with indulgence. So that case study is what we walked through during my portion of the talk.
Fabulous. Thanks, Mimi. I have to add that there was a lot of chocolate discussions in these indulgent concepts. So, it was so interesting in conversations, and Webb's going to talk about how he took these concepts. It's so interesting that chocolate is so inherent in part of indulgence, but there's great ways to continue to, get to that aspiration that consumers had with regard to health.
Yes.
So thanks, Mimi. So Webb, let me turn it over to you. How did you take this? What process did you use? Tell us a little bit about how you created these more indulgent, health-focused concepts.
Yeah, so we really looked at the pre and post COVID data that Insights Now had, and really analyzed what was trending, what the consumer was looking for, and then took the Playful Insights concepts from Turkey and kind of put them together. So we took these really indulgent, out there, snacky desserts, and said, okay, based on the trend data about what people are looking for, higher protein, some diet focused stuff, maybe not, there are some that weren't statistically significant, but very trending, like keto and some of that low sugar that's implied with the keto, that went with it, and review the concepts and said, how do I make these more health focused, maybe subliminal health or stealth health, and based on some of the trending work that we do in our consultancy for development, using fibers to displace sugars and chocolates, and give a fuller, richer experience while reducing the calories, reducing the sugar, reducing the fat, reducing the things that are implicitly really indulgent, but also not as snackable, healthy. So helping remove some of that stuff. And I think to Mimi's point, sugar reduction wasn't something that was necessarily well sought out for, but I think still the maybe not the call outs, but the calorie counts on the packaging really would deliver the message even farther, where people aren't looking for sugar-free or reduced sugar, but when they turn the package over and it's farther down on the ingredient state, more or less added sugars on the panel really drive it. But we had the ability to take the data provided by Insights Now and the concepts provided by IFF, work them together, and then resubmit them back out to the same consumer area to get feedback on whether we had done the right thing or not. And some of the products really were improvement by the data, and some of the products were at parity or a little bit less because just what they're looking for. And interesting from the chocolate standpoint, it was chocolate, 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 and more chocolate. So how do we try to add a little bit different experience to it? And unfortunately, when we started taking the chocolate out, the indulgent factor of it wasn't quite as there as we had hoped for. But really looking for that that increased protein and pre and probiotics and that kind of information.
Fabulous. So Webb, talk a little bit more for us. How did you iterate this? How, this is, you're taking lots of different pieces of information. How do you work to continue to improve products? We talked about, there was a walnut concept, for example, a walnut cake, and it didn't score quite as well as we had hoped. What would you do now? How would you kind of continue to improve it?
Yeah, it's what's really interesting about the process and this insights and the consumer feedback is the quick iteration and development of it. So one of the original concepts that came out of it was a walnut pumpkin cake. Sounds great, very indulgent, unfortunately very seasonal, even though it was a concept pushed out from the original consumer phase. When we went back and retested it, some of the commentary was back that it was a little bit seasonal. We indulgified it by putting some turmeric in the frosting, making it brightly colored, really trying to get that visual appeal, because a pumpkin cake is not going to necessarily wow you by the eyes, so let's try a wow by the eyes. But even those same kind of concepts and desserts, maybe from a non-seasonal standpoint, we try to change that over into an apple cake or a sweet potato cake, or something that's less focused on a time frame during the year, but something that can really make people happy to eat it at any given occasion. And so that iterative process, getting that feedback, we want a pumpkin walnut cake. Okay, here you go. That's not what we want. Okay, what would you like? Would you like an apple cake, or would you like something a little bit different? And getting that feedback loop to tighten in what they're really looking for. And maybe it's not the the flavor profile per se, but the experience of a rich, moist cake with brightly, naturally colored frosting and health benefits.
Great, excellent. Let me remind everyone who's an attendee, please put your questions in the question box, and we'll definitely work to answer all of those. I do have a question, so I'm going to jump in first. You know, as we kind of had this discussion, Mimi, you talked a little bit about engaging with product developers and with consumers. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how the Playful Insights tool that you utilized really kind of helped facilitate that, or what was the benefit of it for you guys?
Yeah, so we utilized an innovation sprint process. So from the start, the idea was to very much involve the consumer up front and start the whole innovation process and new concept development process with consumer immersion and consumer input. And, you know, there are many ways to do that, right? You can bring in a lot of data, you can, you know, have people read stories and watch video clips. And we did some of that, but in addition, we used the Playful Insights approach, which ended up being about a half-day session where, you know, consumers are sitting side by side with the product development team, and you're basically, you know, getting to know each other. You're playing with Lego bricks. You're building together. You're telling stories together, and the whole process really just accelerates the whole immersion idea, right? Before you know it, people are forgetting, you know, who's a consumer and who's on the customer team and the product development team. And I just feel like the Playful Insights process really, you know, allows that empathy gap that sometimes exists between the people that are creating a product and the end consumer. It really bridges that gap, and it does so in a really you know, quick, you know, half day session. It's amazing how quickly consumers start to open up in this type of a session where you're using building metaphors and storytelling, and it's kind of magical. So
great. Yeah, it sounds like very, you know, I've used the process together with you. It does bring it to life. And let's take a step back when and Greg, when you're thinking about this, the inputs that you provided into kind of understanding this all, one of the things that we talked a lot about was nutrition and taste. You talked a little bit about that, right? You know,
Right.
it's such a challenge at this point in especially delivering at that. What's your perspective on it, especially around like off flavors or things like that?
That's a great question. So it really comes back, I think it comes back to a fundamental psychology and behavioral science of subconscious cueing. So if you think about sensory cueing, the question is, what are the cues that tell you you're getting what you're expecting to get? So I want indulgent. What are the cues that tell me that I'm getting something indulgent? If I feel like this product is also supposed to have some additional health benefits, if it's not completely stealth, as an example, say I'm on, you know, I'm seeking out high protein, I may want to put some maybe whey characters that you would maybe traditionally consider an off character in, say, a traditional dessert. But now, because you're pitching it that way, because you're presenting it that way, you're telling people this is going to improve your health. You actually they're okay. In fact, they want that subconscious cue in order to make that as believable as possible. And if you're bringing out something new, maybe it's an ingredient they've never heard of before, you can, as a designer, you could design that characteristic yourself and teach them what that sensory cue is, so they go, oh, now that I know I'm getting this, I know to react this way. And it follows all the way through to the physiology side too. Those cues allow your brain to release differently when you know they're there, where you think they're there, than when it's not there. And you have a different physical experience as well.
So interesting. Well, thank you all. Let's see. Let me just see if there's any questions that we have for any of our speakers. Let's see. I think one question we have is for Greg. Is you talked about dieting. Tell us a little bit more about dieting. Is that a spike? Is it something that's going on? Is it a trend?
It's definitely a spike more than a trend. If I had to put money on it, I would say we're spiking for a little while, and then it's going to filter right back off again. Back in the 50s, we were really, really high. Half the population was on diets at the time. Now, diets mean lots of different things to lots of different people, and is what we're seeing in the free from movement and the whole clean label movement in general is that people are moving away from saying they're on a diet to having a lifestyle that includes a diet program. And I think that's what we're going to see more and more. We're certainly seeing a big spike in weight loss. That happened, especially in China right now. It's a really big spike. Over double the amount of people going on weight loss programs right now. So, and they're farther ahead than the rest of the world. So, if the rest of the world follows suit, I think we're going to see that. But I do think it'll be more of a spike than it is like a brand new upward swing that we're going to see for years on end.
Interesting.
So something to capitalize right away. Like if you're in the industry, right, you got to, these are the move fast because you're going to want to capitalize on it quick.
Awesome. All right, Greg, do you see any other questions specifically right now? I've got
none that haven't been asked already.
All right. So that's a great level set. I hope you guys all kind of enjoyed that initial discussion about really thinking about healthy indulgence and how we address that through the case study. And thanks to Greg and Mimi and Webb for all the efforts of putting that together. We're going to transition now to a broader panel. As you see on the screen, we have a few other friends that are with us. And what we're going to do now is kind of take this deep dive into this growing opportunity, and just continue to talk, to discuss more. We're not presenting it all. We're just all, our goal here is just to share and to have a conversation. So we've got Carol McCall from PepsiCo, Janet Carver from Ingredion, Menexia Ciboli from Firmenich. Menexia isn't on screen, but she's here. So we were having some technical problems, but she's here in voice. So we'll ask her a question. So hopefully she'll be able to respond. And then Johnny Tom from Griffin Foods. So exciting for all of us to go. So as we transition, when we think about this, we're going to talk about current challenges, how we address solutions to those, and because there's a lot of complexity. We just talked about how many different aspects just in this one specific case study. But I think that this virtual panel, hopefully will give you some more specific insights. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off, and we're going to go to Carol McCall, R&D Director of Global Foods, Culinary and Consumer Discovery and Applications at PepsiCo Food. Thank you, Carol, for joining us.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's see. I'm gonna reverse the order. So we're going to start with Carol. So what advice or watchouts would you give to product developers who are seeking to make products more clean label? Webb gave us some insights. How would you build upon that? What's some perspectives that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think first and foremost, many of you touched on that, is understand your consumer, right? Who are you targeting this for, and really understand, the tension or the job that you're trying to deliver, the problem you're trying to solve, and understand the requirements for that. So what are the requirements in terms of attributes, the experience, and that will help you understand, your sandbox you can play in. I think, a lot of times we struggle just having an overloaded list of requirements, right? You want a laundry list of things. It's got to be non-GMO. It's got to be, organic. It's got to have high protein, all of these things. But really, for that moment, what is that consumer really looking for? And then you can prioritize, because you're just handcuffing yourself if you put all of these requirements on the table and really limiting what you can deliver in terms of the experience, the cost, the processability, all of those things that we need to balance as product developers. So I think understanding your consumer first and foremost to help you prioritize that list, and then bring in your regulatory team from the beginning, your legal folks, because that always gets us at the end. And there's different regulations for different regions and different categories. So if we don't understand those from the beginning, we can get far down a path that we actually can't commercialize. So if we can bring them in early, and they could give us the watch out. So as product developers, we can understand that and design with that in mind from the start. Those are the biggest things for me.
Great. Anyone from the panel have a comment or suggestion? Johnny, you and I were talking about this earlier.
Yeah, I think I'm going to dig a little bit into the regulatory piece. I just think to save a lot of headaches in your development, make sure you leverage your regulatory team. It can save you a lot of headaches down the road. A lot of regions, a lot of global regions are extremely different. What might be allowed in Japan as opposed to what might be allowed in the UK, EU, as opposed to what might be allowed in South Africa. Very, very different from both an ingredients perspective as well as a consumer acceptability perspective. Especially in a region like the UK or the EU, where it's actually the UK retailers that sort of determine the ingredient restrictions that are often even more stringent than those restrictions that are put forward by the government. So again, I just want to echo that it's very important to know your consumer and know your customer when you're doing global product development. Because like I said, if you're dealing with a UK retailer, their ingredient restrictions might be drastically different and a lot tougher than just the government restrictions put on by the specific region that you're trying to launch your product in.
Right.
And I wanted to add to that, Sarah, if you don't mind, on top of the regulatory and knowing what ingredients you're going to use and what the restrictions are, we find that sometimes what's overlooked is the actual sourcing in the region. So I might be in the US or the UK formulating with a certain protein source that's non-soy, that people, you can't source it in Thailand or Asia the same type, and it's a completely different product when they try to use their local sourcing. So it's something that, you know, as global companies, you know, you have to make sure that they can replicate it in their area, or at least best case replication, because you could be creating something phenomenal, but they can't actually get the ingredients locally or regionally to make.
Yeah, makes sense. And Menexia, anything to add?
Yes, I definitely agree with that. I think also we're finding that the consumers are redefining how the clean label is defined across the board. It's not just the ingredient statement anymore. It is a more holistic approach that encompasses mindful eating. And so that needs to be taken into consideration whenever we have a solution or whenever we produce innovation and new product development.
Wonderful. Thank you for that add. So let me just make sure I've introduced everyone on the panel. I've said their name, but I haven't really let you know where their perspective and coming from is, because I think, you know, just to get everyone on the same page. So Janet Carver is our culinary director from Ingredion. She's the global culinary director from Ingredion. Johnny Tomlin, corporate executive chef, global business development at Griffith Foods, and Menexia Soboli, who's the vice president of North America Savory at Firmenich. And then I already introduced Carol at the beginning. So just so you see, we've got lots of different perspectives from multiple different companies here. And it's interesting some of the themes that come out, but there's different ways that we address different problems. So I'm gonna pose another question, and Janet, we're gonna go to you first.
Okay.
Could you share a challenge and how you overcame it in designing a clean label food product for a global audience? Is there something specific that you could share with us today?
Well, yeah, as I said to you before, I mean, I could go on and on about that's all my team's been asked to do globally, literally for the last 5 years, is to work on all natural and clean label type of products. So I mean, specifically, there's the one, Carol brought it up. The biggest problem we have, and it's still to this day constant, is that they want the kitchen sink and the nutrition too. They want gluten-free, non-GMO, all natural. It needs to stay on the shelf for a year. It needs to also go through, you know, the tundra and freeze. So I think the biggest thing that we find is making sure we get marketing from our customer together, as well as our own internal. I have a lot of internal customers as well, to make sure we're all on the same page with the customer's wants and needs, and that we want to be realistic that if you want to make a cake that's gluten-free, sugar-free, it's almost impossible to keep that clean label. Let's focus on where the most desirable attributes are, or where you think the most bang for your buck, for lack of a better term. Is it the sugar-free? We're noticing that sugar-free, unless it's in the diabetic realm or in the, you know, for health purposes, it's more sugar reduced. That's, as Webb was saying, that's really speaking and resonating more. Once we get that focus and get, again, it's hard to formulate everything. It's hard to make something taste good that's got high protein, no gluten, no sugar. So it's getting that to that realistic point as an ingredient supplier to say, look, we can do this, this, and this, but if you want gluten-free, it's very hard to remove methyl cellulose out of that equation, because there's really no good methyl cellulose replacement right now. And believe me, every ingredient company in the world is working on that. But there are some fixes. But if I'm trying to do gluten-free, I can on its own, and I'm not so worried about protein, and I want to look at clean label, we could take out the methyl cellulose and use psyllium husk. It's not the exact same texture, but it gives you some of the same qualities. So trying to get our customers to focus on not just the ingredients they want to use, but we have to look at holistically, what can we really do as an ingredient supplier? I don't want to tell someone from PepsiCo that, yes, I can give you gluten-free, sugar-free, protein-enriched, high fiber. I mean, we want to be as realistic as possible with our customers and try to formulate around that. Now, globally, so I'll use the gluten-free, actually, I'd rather use the functional build back for sugar reduction, because that's a big problem. It's very hard to use, to find good cost informed or cost reduced type of ingredients to replace the typical polyols you would use to build back structure when you're reducing sugar. So like the erythritols, the polyols, the sorbitols, nobody wants it on their label anymore. So looking at all natural fruit purees, all natural vegetable purees, looking at other ways of building that functionality back, looking at FOS, looking at GOS. But those type of ingredients, natural and it's desirable and give you nutritional function and fiber, they're also dose tolerant, that you have to worry about dose tolerance. So it's making sure that holistically, we know we're not going to overdose on, say, a FOS and give someone some gastrointestinal distress, for lack of a better word, but how can we offset that and bring that in and look at natural ways? And most of the ways we're looking at it is through fruit purees, fruit powders, fruit fibers, vegetable purees, and we're doing a lot of studies on that. And that's really heavily relying on culinary in our company to really almost use the cheats that chefs use in restaurants to get rid of sugar, to get rid of all unnatural, quote unquote, emulsifiers. You know, we've done some stuff and studies on working on mustard flour, for example, instead of putting in mono and diglycerides into getting emulsification. Now the problem is, how do you deflavor that for a very basic and neutral system? So there's a lot of stuff that we look at. The biggest one that we're working on right now and that we're having quite success is the functional build back with sugar reduction. And we've really hit the mark with gluten-free when we're focusing only on gluten-free with some of the more natural fibers and cellulose powders that aren't carboxymethylcellulose. So, you know, it's hard to talk about one specific project. If you said 10 years ago, what's the biggest and hardest thing? 10 years ago, it was putting cornstarch on a label and having it stable. Well, that's not a problem anymore, because companies like mine, Tate & Lyle, ADM, we've all come up with these functional native starches that can completely do that. Now it's the next level. What are the non-polyol, polyol, the big bulking agents that are functional, that are going to be on that list, that Whole Foods list of acceptable?
Oh, thank you for your perspective. And it's right. It's not simple. It's a very complex and dynamic process, right? We all know that we have to learn every single day, and you know, and apply the knowledge, and things change. You know, it's interesting, right? But going back to some basic tools and tricks from culinology. So Johnny, you know, how are you applying this in your world? You know, you're coming from a culinary perspective, as is Webb. So what are some of the things that you layer on when you're thinking about, and kind of the way Janet was speaking about ingredients?
Well, to be completely honest, I've been in manufacturing for probably a little longer than I've been in restaurants. But I think Janet makes a really good point in that replacing these synthetic ingredients with natural, often the usages are different, and in some cases, you're actually extending the ingredient deck as opposed to shortening it. And if it's a consumer perspective that they want a nice, tidy, small ingredient deck, you know, replacing something synthetic with natural ingredients will often lengthen that deck, as well as requiring, you know, different application amounts. And let's just be honest, from a cost perspective, those synthetic ingredients are cheap and they're in at usually low amounts. So when you want to switch to natural, your cost is going to go up, and that has to be clearly communicated, I think, to the customer, and you're mediating that customer's expectations.
Right. Right. And Webb, anything to add from your culinary perspective?
I think it also goes into in the Culinex world, we reach the ingredient suppliers to the brand owners, and the brand owners' expectations, going back to all the handcuffs we're throwing on and everything we're building down to it. For example, if I was trying to make a keto cereal, right, a standard puff cereal is 20-25 grams of carbs per serving, and all of a sudden we're expected to make that now 1 gram of net carb per serving. That's quite a dramatic reduction. Why can't we just make it down to 10? I mean, we've cut it in half. It's considerably better. The consumer expectation is it's healthier, but is it the brand owner that's putting those handcuffs on by saying I have to be competitive with it versus not, you know, 1 net carb, but reduced carbs, reduced sugar, a healthier space, a more logical, rational space to play in, where I can leverage more naturally derived solutions, more whole food ingredients, and not having to drive down to a lot of those net carb calculation reduction stuff that makes it so that a cup of cereal stops to become a cup and is a quarter cup because my density is reduced because I've lost all my carbohydrates to puff with. So really understanding what the end consumer wants as translated by the brand owner through the developer from the ingredient manufacturer. It's kind of tying all that back together.
No, that's a great perspective. So I'm a consumer person, so let's talk a little bit about consumer. You know, Minexia, can I ask you to talk a little bit about how the consumer is driving your focus on clean label and clean label ingredients and labeling, and your perspective on that?
Yes, absolutely. You know, the consumer is the center of our universe, right? Whether we are at the business of developing the product or in the ingredient side, is the center of our universe. And what we are finding is that the consumers, as I mentioned before, they are expanding and redefining a bit the definition of clean label. So of course it is the ingredients, but it's also they are taking more of this holistic approach based on the mindful eating. It does depend heavily on the moment and on the category of foods that they are looking to consume. So an ingredient that might be considered clean in a certain application might not be considered clean in another. So when we develop solutions or products, we really need to hone into understanding the moment, the framework, the frame of mind of the consumer in order to be able to give them the right solution. The redefinition of clean label also has probably 3 different ways of expressing itself. Has to do with the simplicity, transparency of ingredients, also sustainability elements. So it is a much more complicated equation than what we potentially originally thought, especially when you factor in all the other presenters, what they mention in terms of all the different factors. Having said all of that, the interest of the consumers continues to rise on clean labels. So from an ingredient standpoint, we are striving for solutions that can serve them across the continuum, from the simplicity all the way to the sustainability, and certainly natural, organic. Those are things that the consumer is seeking to as badges of confidence also when they make selections. So I feel that the question, how does it drive our solution platforms and our innovation, is by considering all of this framework and try to hone and take a deep dive at the moment and the specific category that the consumer is interested in.
Right. And
I just have
Carol,
a,
anything? Oh,
I just had
go
a
ahead.
quick comment on there. I think just keying into what was just said. Clean label is always a moving target, and clean label doesn't just mean clean ingredients anymore. It also means clean sourcing. Clean
Yes.
sourcing is an essential element of clean label these days. Consumers want to get some social value out of what they're buying, as opposed to just the value of the actual food item itself from a taste and from a taste perspective. So I think that ultimately has to be built into this idea of clean label, that sourcing matters, sustainability matters, where those ingredients are coming from that compose this product, that matters just as much as what those specific ingredients are.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, we saw that globally. Yeah, as COVID came along, that got, and the big shift in sustainability is we used to talk about it as being sustainability is about the earth, but the flip that's happening right now is sustainability is about the people. And so as the marketing and the messaging for our products shift towards, you're doing this to take care of you rather than doing this to take care of some inanimate object, it's really quickly changing how people are viewing sustainability and the value of sourcing and things like that as well. So we're right on the tip of a lot of sustainability growth here as well.
And Greg and John, I wanted to add to that. I just recently worked on a project that I spent a lot of time in the background of the biodiverse and sustainability story of every ingredient we chose for that formulation, which is something I was not really asked much about before. And we spent an inordinate amount of time researching and how would this educate the new consumer to this new product that's very sustainable, very bringing it from other countries into the US, which is the reverse effect. There's a lot of great ingredients out there being used to solve some of these problems in other countries and regions. Now there's almost an education factor, which helps with the mindfulness when people feel like not only are they learning, they're being sustainable and they're helping an indigenous group of people that might have been always using this ingredient. So it's very much becoming commonplace.
Absolutely, I could not agree more. We are finding this all the time when we are looking for deeper consumer insights. And that is why I believe that kind of expanding our definition of clean label and on the same time focusing on what elements matter the most to the consumer, depending on the specific category of foods and the specific moment and mindset that they are finding themselves is probably the only way to help us sort out all the different dimensions that clean label can have, from the ingredient statement to the transparency and the sourcing to truly sustainability and all the choices that go with that.
Yeah, and I would say a lot of this conversation is, it's so much more than the product that we're talking about, right? It's the whole experience. It's the positioning, yes. It's the ingredient sourcing, it's the packaging, it's the brand and what it communicates, what it stands for. So I think a lot of times as product developers, when we get our briefs, we immediately go to the product. How am I going to design this product? What's my formulation? It's so much more than that. And I think if we can, continue to have that dialogue with our business partners and say, we're coming up with a solution, but it's an experience solution. It's not just a product solution. I think that will make the propositions that much stronger because that's what the consumers are paying attention to. It's the whole 360. It's not just the product, which is important, don't get me wrong, and we need to deliver, but it's not the whole story as well.
Right, and so from us, from an ingredient standpoint, from Firmenich, a lot of the solutions that we are developing really need to cover the gamut and the range of all of the things we talked about. So to go back, Sarah, to your question, how does the consumer guide us? They guide us to really sort out this very complex equation and have solutions available that is going to serve all the three elements of the clean label that I highlighted.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for that great discussion. Can I add, just to anyone, just about when you take it from a global perspective, is there another layer, is there another perspective that we need to add from, we've talked about sustainability or things like that. What, the challenge I think right now is that we've talked about being pretty, consumer centric, right, within the culture and understanding that. But now we're trying to be global as well. How do you balance those two between kind of culture, very, very specific, and being global? Mimi, would you kind of kick us off on kind of the perspective of balancing, I guess, local and global?
Uh-oh.
Mimi's on mute. Oh, Mimi.
Sorry. I'm sitting next to a train, so every time the train comes by, I was putting it on mute. I forgot to unmute it.
No problem.
Yeah, so global versus local, again, I think a lot of us and a lot of our, our customers think very global and want to build global, but people eat very local, right? So you really have to, it goes back to, I think, things we've already said. It's just really understand the context and the consumer moment and what's important, because sometimes there could be a part of the solution that you create or part of your taste design or your product design could have kind of a global core, but maybe there's some nuance that you can craft specifically for different localities, and I think that's definitely an approach that we've taken at IFF and work with our customers on very much. But it does go back to just knowing who you're designing for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd echo, Mimi, what you said about if we are truly trying to do a global solution, we think about a global core or a chassis, right? The main foundation of the idea is consistent, but then you can localize it with a specific ingredient or flavor or a seasoning that really relates to that local consumer. Or you may have to, use an ingredient substitute because of their cost structure and their supply chain. But, the projects that we charter as PepsiCo as global are the ones that we believe can have broader reach, at least from a chassis standpoint, to have scale and efficiency. For the ones that are truly, have so many restrictions and requirements that it will only work in this region if you specialize it so much, the local team should really, be the ones driving that, and we can be a consultant or, help them with a lot of the technical unlocks and knowledge. But, it's best for them to drive it because they know their business and their consumer the best.
And I think going back to a comment you made earlier, sometimes it's not about the product either. Maybe you can have the same product, but it's a different way you communicate about that product in a different locality.
And speaking to that point, I mean, that's why I have team members that are sitting in all of our major selling regions. So if I have a project that comes into me, but it is very regionalized, we just had that happen. It was very regionalized to Asia Pacific, specifically Thailand and Vietnam and Singapore. I sent that project was led and completely completed by my culinologist that sits in Singapore, because she's the one embedded in the culture with the team, and it used very global products that were available all over, but they needed a very specific flavor profile and type of texture that we're not used to in the US. So that's why it's good for me to have culinologists in all the different regions, so I can farm out more regionally regional projects to them specifically, and just kind of sit back and let them lead them.
Yeah, I think that's just super key. I do most of my product development throughout Asia, and having the local teams there that I was able to learn from, to learn the local tastes, the texture, perspective of the local consumers. You can't develop in the dark from a different region and try to launch something into somewhere across the world. People have different taste perceptions. There's different wants and needs in the market, and really leveraging that local team, if you have one in that specific region, is super key if you want your product to succeed from a global perspective.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. I totally agree with what all of you said. The trends are global. I mean, we have seen now, movements that they are across the planet, and whether you're in Europe or North America or Asia, like the plant-based, for example, and others, and clean label are global movements. But how they express themselves at the local level is different depending on a lot of the attributes for the consumers that they are looking for, but also the regulatory environment. And that is a very big key in regionalizing the solutions. We're finding that solutions that might be very well liked in Europe, we might not be able to leverage in North America because of the regulatory environment. So we need to be very creative with that.
Even with COVID though too, everything's accelerating. If you talk about
Yes.
plant-based as a global trend, you have China as a region, for instance, or Japan, which had very, very little interest in plant-based or meat alternatives 6 months ago. There was interest, but it was on the horizon.
Right.
Now in this COVID world that we're living in, we're just seeing requests come in left and right from big Japanese QSRs, large global QSRs in China that are all looking for plant-based solutions when, 6 to 12 months ago, they said, nope, we're not interested right now. It's something that could be on the horizon for us, but it's not for us right now. So we're seeing that acceleration of trends, maybe based on disruption of the supply chain from COVID, where, you're seeing things emerge a lot faster.
Yeah, and Johnny, you got to the last question that we kind of had here was a little bit about COVID. How is this situation, the disruption, how is it really impacting you? What are the changes? What are the adjustments that you're having to make right now? We kind of, bounce back and forth throughout the panel. Janet, what's your perspective? What are some of the major things that are impacting you most?
I wholeheartedly agree with Johnny on the all of a sudden we're getting a ton of regional demand from Asia on plant-based proteins, and alt meats and alt seafood. That's a big deal. And same thing, 6 months ago, China and Asia had no interest. The biggest change for us is how, as an ingredient supplier, how to interact with our customers and meet their needs. And we've gone to a lot of virtual platforms, as everyone has. And my team has been leading the charge, especially with, we're creating like box type testing and evaluation kits to send out to customers and taste along or cook along, or so it's actually putting us out of our comfort zone and becoming very creative in how we as are linking in with our customers, who would be the PepsiCos and the Griffiths of the world and the IFFs, and how do we help them with our ingredients and not be there physically, but be able to taste and evaluate and understand their true needs. That's the biggest shift for me, on top of the alt meat and alt seafood is just exploding across the board. I mean, especially in Asia, we can't keep up with the demands for it right now.
I'm just going to go around my little window pane. Mimi, what's your perspective and what's the biggest influences with COVID right now for you? Mimi's muted again with the train.
Everything everyone's mentioned is certainly, on the radar for us. And I think health, I think consumers realizing maybe the vulnerability and the importance of being healthy and having strong immune systems, and kind of the creative challenge of how to incorporate health at a new level in a wide variety of different types of products.
Great. Thanks, Mimi. And Carol, anything to add?
Yeah, very, very similar to both Janet and Mimi. We've had to be very creative in how we're creating stimuli. Also, we're just starting to get back into the kitchen and the labs on a limited basis to create with our teams. But using digital type of technologies in terms of visuals and 3D mock-ups, and and then how do we send these tasting kits, right? And how do we engage with consumers a bit more virtually, or send them kits to their homes? We've had to do that as well. We've also accelerated some programs in strategic areas that we're looking at that are more health forward, that were maybe on the back burner before or further out in our priority list. We pulled them up. I would say, much of our business is doing quite well right now. Just, the comfort, the familiarity, the snacking, eating at home, the retail business is doing very well. Our away from home and food service obviously is suffering, like many others, but we are fortunate to be in the category we're in, and consumers are looking towards our products for a little moment of happiness and something to do during the day. So that's been helpful. And just the community of everyone we're working with, finding creative ways to partner with us has been super helpful.
Great. All right, so if any other questions from our audience, make sure you're putting it in the question box. We hope that you've all enjoyed this discussion and dialogue as we've gone through. So let me pause just a second, see if any questions are coming up. Greg, do you see any questions coming up through that haven't been answered yet? All right, so with that, we just want to thank everyone on the panel, all of the IFT speakers for your time and engagement, all of our attendees. I hope you're enjoying IFT if you're able to attend that. If just coming and having this discussion, we hope you enjoyed just interacting. That was our goal. We just felt like we wanted to interact and chat and talk a little bit more, and really just focused on the topic of clean label. So from all of us at Insights Now and everyone else here, we want to thank you, and hope you have a great rest of the day and good conference, and good luck as we develop great things and adjust for the changing world with COVID. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, all the panelists.
All right.
All right, have a good day.
You
All
too.
right, thanks everyone. Have a great day.
All right.
You
Bye.
too.